To disassemble the Huck range force for repair, remove exterior pieces including the pintail bottle and the nuts from the front of the tool. And remove the battery. Remove the large nut that holds the front end assembly on by unscrewing. This is a normal right-hand thread, and pull that off the front. Then remove the front tube as well. Using a small Phillips screwdriver, an impact driver might be helpful. Remove all of the Phillips head screws holding the two halves of the clamshell together. Then pull the two halves of the housing apart. It should come apart pretty smoothly. Just pull it straight off and all of the components will be retained in the back half of the clamshell. The working parts are modular. The bottom of the tool houses the control board and adjustment panel with all of the electronics. The trigger is located in the middle. In the main body is the motor, the gearbox, and the transfer gear underneath the ball screw and main drive assembly. Everything in the bottom half of the tool is very modular, with each piece indicated on the bill of materials and in the repair guide. The upper assembly is actually a sub-assembly of its own that's joined by some machine screws here in the middle. This drive assembly will break down even further. The Huck range force by Makita has quite a few sensors and electronic components, including an LED light on the front, activation trigger in the middle, control panel in the base. There is a sensor on the backside that assures the pintail collector bottle or the back cap are in place. These are some of the electronic components on the exterior that may become damaged and need to be replaced. To remove the major mechanical components all in one piece, wobble the upper assembly out of the back shell of the case, and then pull the motor out of the gearbox. Then pull the gearbox and shaft out of the upper assembly. The motor will be retained with its wiring harness. The main drive that contains the ball screw to allow pintails to pass through can be disassembled further to replace worn components inside the assembly. In order to go further, to replace parts inside this subassembly, this back component comes right off. Then, these side plates come off as well. To break this down, set up tool in a vise to hold and grip the insert. Use a 17mm wrench across the machine flats on this component. Then remove from vise and unscrew this component. This next assembly will slide off the back of the shaft and set aside. Then set back up in the vise on the flat of this ball screw. Use the 17mm wrench to remove front adapter and set it aside as well. What's left is the ball screw assembly and two housing components. To open up the housing components, use a 3mm hex or Allen wrench. Then you can simply rock the two assemblies apart by pulling the bearing off of the ball screw nut. The bearing is inside of each half of the housing. Then pull the ball screw from the front housing with its bearing pressed into it. This ball screw assembly is disassembled as far as it should go. This is considered one complete replacement component. This concludes the mechanical disassembly. To troubleshoot one of the switches or one of the electrical components, start in the back half that contains all of those components. Each component has a cableway that the cables run through with a connector that attaches to the main control board at the bottom. Components just lift or pry out. No special tools are required, though a flathead screwdriver or plastic pry tool may be useful to pull the cables out. Simply pull a component out, unplug it, plug the new component back in, and place it in the housing. The motor can be further disassembled to replace just the control panel, or just the rotor, or just the stator. To complete assembly, put the two halves of the clamshell back together. Everything inside is simply retained by the two halves of the clamshell. Snap it back together and put the machine screws and nuts back in as necessary. Next, replace all of the external components. Slide on the front end adapter tube and replace the retainer nut. It simply threads on. Hand tight or use an adjustable wrench open to 17 mm to hold the entire assembly tightly together. Then put on the lock nut first and the nose retaining nut. Replace the pintail bottle or back cap, screw it on until it clicks. Finally, attach the Makita battery, and it's ready to go back to work.
Arconic Fastening Systems, innovation engineered.